And then maybe I'm wrong in thinking about it this way, but going back to that whole buy versus build, because again,
Mhm.
that's, there's a lot of people out there these days who are saying you should buy instead because building, again, what you had mentioned earlier about some of the special breed of individual that could take. And then there's also theoretically the failure rate that people highlight a
Yep.
lot.
Yep.
Do you think one is better than the other, or do you think it's dependent on the individual? I mean, you might have a preference now, but I guess how should somebody determine which one is right for them?
Yeah, great question. And there's a lot to unpack there. I think, theoretically, every purchase, or let's call it investment, every investment decision, you have to have some skin in the game, right? So you have to be willing to put some chips on the table
Hmm.
and ante up. And the degree to which you have the risk tolerance to do that, right, is one real large gating factor, right? You might not, you might prize security over risk. That's one part of it. The other part of it is time. Again, think like an investor. If I have a dollar and I want to turn that dollar into two, how long is it going to take me to do that?
Yeah.
So some people would say, okay, if I have an established business, it's going to take me half the time to turn that dollar into two than if I just did it myself and did a dollar 10 the first year, a dollar 20 the second year,
Hmm.
right, and so on. So those are the two factors people need to think about: their risk and how much they're willing to kind of lay on the line, as well as how much time they want to take to meet their goals.
Hmm.
Um, and then it becomes, once you make that decision, then you have to spin up the machinery. You have to kiss a lot of frogs, right, so to speak, to find the right business for you. And I've seen it the other way too, right? I've seen Microsoft executives that have made $500,000 a year at Microsoft and have stock options, and they want to own a pizza parlor.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? You had $1 billion budget at Microsoft, and now you want to? I mean,
Yeah.
let's think about this, right? You can do it tomorrow. You can write the check for it, but is that business really right for you? So sometimes it takes a little trial and error for folks to think about that as well.
Uh, on that note, retail and food industry, do you stay away from them?
Well, so I was invested. I was one of the first investors in what I'll call a category of home meal replacement.
Okay.
So these are specific companies. There's one up here that was here for years, Dream Dinners, they called it, where typically the model was, 10 or 12 gals or guys would come in and they'd, crack a bottle of wine, and they'd have a bunch of recipes that were basically out in front of them that they could
Yeah.
assemble, home
Okay.
meal assembly, right?
Yeah.
So that was one business that I started early with a partner and ended up selling that one. But I kind of promised my wife that I would never get in the restaurant business, just because it's a very hard business, very
Yeah.
high failure rate, and it's I don't want to say this disparagingly, but it can often be tough on families, right? Because it's kind of counter cyclical to family life. If you're at the restaurant or the bar till 3 in the morning or 2 in the morning or whatever, it's like, you're missing out on some things, right? So
Yeah.
I stayed away from the hardcore restaurant, but I know friends that have wonderful restaurants and have raised great families, right? So it's really kind of up to you. The food business traditionally, as I get older, I think about, what makes the highest margin,
Yeah.
so that you can make some mistakes and still have a reasonable return on your investment.
Hmm.
And the food business, theoretically, um, it's a little fickle for me. And on the food processing side of it, the margins are 2 to 10, 11%, right? So it's not where I want to spend my days these days.